because I'm sure we're all eagerly anticipating seeing what Mother Nature has in store, so we'll enjoy the relative tranquility of this town meeting room. Welcome. I'm Irondequoit Town Supervisor Dave Seeley. For our Irondequoit friends, welcome to your town hall. For our friends from Webster and other communities, thank you for coming. It's always great to see you in our community. Before we get started, I'll ask you to hold your applause, but I just want to list through a few special guests we have here tonight, some public officials. Webster Town Supervisor, my brother to the east, Ron Nesbitt. County Legislature President, Joe Carbone. Irondequoit Town Justice, Joe Janier. From Senator Chuck Schumer's office, Chris Zeltman. From Assembly Majority Leader Morelli's office, Arlie Rosalind Campbell. And I don't know if I saw County Legislator Herbert here. Is he here? Or Hebert? He's out of town. Okay. Thank you. So that's our government officials here, all of whom took part in the lengthy process and were important stakeholders. So what gets us here tonight, I think we had our first meeting late in 2016, and it was the culmination of a number of years' effort, which started really with a letter that was sent in 2015 to the Genesee Transportation Council. It was a letter that had multiple government stakeholders ranging from town, county, state, and federal government officials expressing support to look for a 12-month solution to providing 12-month access across the Irondequoit Bay Outlet. That was the starting point of this feasibility study, which brings us here tonight. A process was set up. I'm very happy that it was largely stakeholder-driven, the most important stakeholder being the general public. I'm happy that our scoring system was largely driven by public input and not, the input of the steering committee. The steering committee had a say in it, but largely was driven by public input. So we're very happy with that. And that brings us here tonight really to kind of discuss all of those alternatives. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to rely on our consultants who worked with us at Fisher & Associates. But I just want to thank the members of the steering committee for taking part in a good collaboration. I want to thank the members of the public, many of whom are here tonight, for their input, their honest input. I think we're all stakeholders in this, whether we live near the Bay Outlet, whether we reside in the towns, and certainly your input and concerns and support and whatever was valued and essential to this process. So a little bit of a general order of things. I'm going to introduce our consultants, Fisher Associates. They're going to run through the feasibility study. They're going to run through the methodology, the process, and the ultimate, I want to say results, but the ultimate scoring and outcomes. What I will ask, we'll stay here as long as possible tonight, answering questions, concerns, letting people voice. But my request is, let's try and get through the presentation, let them outline it so that people can distill it all at once. And then after that, we will take questions and answers, comments, as long as we want. So that would be my one request. Our consultants in the steering committee have done a good job putting this together. This is a PowerPoint. Subsequently, a fuller report will be issued and really results a lot of hours of input. So with that, thank you again for being here. And I'm now going to introduce Roseanne Schmidt from Fisher & Associates.
Thank you for being here tonight. You'll also be hearing from Rick Bennett and Tim Faulkner, also with Fisher Associates. They were integral members of our team that conducted this feasibility study. So we're going to be tag teaming here in this presentation. What we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to just kind of recap the feasibility study process. Many of you may not have been able to attend some of the previous meetings, so we are going to reiterate some of the information that has been discussed at some of the previous meetings. We're going to present the evaluation criteria that was established, as Dave said, through a process of input from the steering committee and also the public through public informational meetings as well as online public surveys that were conducted. We're also going to present the alternatives that were evaluated for year-round access and present the final scoring of how those ranked with respect to the evaluation criteria that was established. And then, as Dave said, we're going to open up for questions and answers. This is the purpose of the study that was put out with the request for proposals that was originally issued by the town of Arundecoit when they were soliciting for a consultant team to conduct the study. And it was really to provide a mechanism to assess whether there were reasonable alternatives available to provide that year-round access for all travelers, vehicles, boats, bikes, and pedestrians, while also preserving the Arundecoit Bay's ability to serve as a safe harbor. As many of you may know, that the original bridge that was there was removed because Arundecoit Bay was determined to be a safe harbor of refuge for boaters, and that was what resulted in the original removal of the bridge back in the 80s. I will note that only the feasibility study has been funded at this time. There's been no funds obtained for any further design or construction of any alternative. So this is just a feasibility study to assess what could potentially be feasible, and no further design or construction is proposed at this time. This is a summary of the study tasks that we were given to do and complete as part of the feasibility study. We began the project with, our project initiation task was to sit down and meet and really discuss in detail the scope of work that was going to be completed, establish the steering committee, outline the framework of the public involvement and when those key public meetings were going to happen, gather all the past documents that were prepared, studies that had been done, and really distill it all and see what is needed to be considered again as part of this feasibility study. From that point, we began an existing conditions analysis because things do change over time, so what might have been documented in previous reports needed to be looked at again and confirmed of what was there from an environmental standpoint, traffic standpoint. So we collected all that data, and then we had our first public informational meeting to discuss and present the results of our existing conditions analysis. From there, we started developing a preliminary list of alternatives that we would look at as part of the feasibility study. What we were going to look at is potential impacts and costs of any alternatives that were going to be evaluated in detail. We also conducted a public informational meeting at that point, with it outlined a preliminary list, and we gathered input of some additional alternatives that the public wanted to see evaluated. And so those were added to the list as well. We also, in that process, as I said before, gathered input on the evaluation criteria that would be used in that process to rank the alternatives. And Rick's going to go into that process in a little bit more detail, so I'll keep it brief here. We went then, once the alternative evaluation criteria was established, and we went through, started evaluating the alternatives in more detail. Tonight, we're at the point where we're going to present the results of that evaluation and the final ranking of the alternatives that made it through the detailed evaluation process. So we're at that final public informational meeting. As Dave said, a final draft report will be published. That will probably be out in a few weeks, and it will be on the Town of Arundecoit's website. Hard copies will be available at both towns, the town halls and the libraries, so you can look for that in the next few weeks.
So going back almost a full year ago, when the process got underway, we sat down with that steering committee that was developed and brainstormed the objective ranking evaluation that we wanted to frame the study under. All concepts were out there, all ways of looking at the study were put on the table, and these 11 criteria were established as the important ways of looking at the alternatives and framing the impacts and studying them for any of the solutions at the outlet bridge. They are displayed there. At that same time, the steering committee ranked them from what they felt were the most heavily weighted priority, what would have the most weight in evaluating the evaluation criteria, down to the least important. That is represented in the column on the left-hand side under steering committee. They ranked them, one being what they felt at the time to be the most important. In this case, it was project cost. through construction impacts being ranked number 11, the least important for evaluating the criteria. We then took these same 11 segments out to the first public information meeting held in this room, and the public that was in attendance that night were asked to vote on establishing their priority ranking as well. Same system, one being what is most important to them, down to 11, what they felt was the least important when we went to evaluate. The results of that finding, or that meeting, is in the second column. To get more input, we then presented the same 11 evaluation criteria in an online survey where a little over 700 respondents also voted on this, and their ranking is in this third column over here. Then we aggregated and averaged those together to get a system-wide, community-wide based ranking of that criteria by averaging it out in this column, establishing the overall rank, again, from what is going to be the most heavily weighted priority to the least weighted priority. The result of that system is establishing from 1 to 11. So the outcome of that is that establishing improved year-round access, the community felt was the most important way of evaluating any of the alternatives. Followed closely behind by emergency access, then the environmental impacts that any of the alternatives may have, impacts to properties both public and private, economic impacts to the area, cost of the project, any impacts to the aesthetics, the feel, the environment of the outlet itself or any of the other neighborhoods that may be affected by an alternative, the long-term operation and maintenance costs of whatever solution is being evaluated, the access for non-motorized modes of transportation, so your pedestrians, your bicyclists, as well as the navigation traffic. Impacts to highway users costs, which is the delay you may experience from having to travel a longer distance to get to a destination, or anything that would impede your ability to get where you want to go and slow you down. And then the last one is construction impacts, and that's the temporary effects associated with actually building any of these alternatives should a solution go forward. So temporary detours, impacts to businesses, things of that nature were wrapped up into the construction impacts. So this is the hierarchy that the objective process established to evaluate the alternatives. And this was set up prior to the development of any of the alternatives, so that way it was a standalone scoring metric that could be utilized in the study. The next step in the process, again, back in January, was to then develop the alternatives that were to be considered. This is a culmination of that list, and as Roseanne mentioned, at the first public meeting, not all of these were under evaluation from the previous reports and then the stakeholder committee when we started to look at brainstorming as far as what alternatives could be out there. As part of that first public meeting, a tunnel option and a ferry option were also brought up as possible solutions that should be considered. So we took those in, responded to that public comment, and added them to the list of other alternatives to develop the whole list. Just starting at the top, the null alternative is fancy words for the existing condition. It's what's out there now. It's the seasonally operated swing bridge that is put in place for vehicle traffic during the winter months and removed from service to allow navigation traffic during the summer months, not providing access for the cars. That's a basis of comparison alternative, and that's why it's still in the mix. It's the what's out there now, and it's the basis of all comparison. Other options were rehabilitating that existing swing bridge, and what that is salvaging the steel of that swing bridge, putting it onto a new mechanism to provide year-round access and operational controls to make it movable on a more recurring basis. Two other options of a high-level fixed bridge. This is a permanent bridge that does not move that would bring vehicle traffic up and over the outlet bridge. And a thing to note with that is that the channel of the outlet to the lake, the waterways are governed by the Coast Guard. And they set some standards on what type of geometry and what type of environment can be created by that bridge. And they would require 75 feet of underclearance between the bottom of the bridge to the water level to allow any type of navigational traffic on the lake to access the bay. In order to do that, those approaches to raise the roadway up over 75 feet extend between a quarter mile and a half mile to either direction. I'll get into some of the impacts of that on a couple later slides, but that's what a fixed bridge is. The extension of ramps from Irondequoit Bay Bridge to some point in Irondequoit preliminarily looked at a connection to the Route 590 and Titus intersection in that area as a connection point. That is what that alternative is. Putting into a mix a tunnel at the existing location, so removing the swing bridge, and instead of going up and over with a fixed bridge, it would go down and underneath the channel itself in a tunnel situation. Looking at a brand new movable bridge at that existing location, so tearing out what's there and building, putting in a brand new movable bridge with new controls and new operations. Looked at a connection from Route 104, again just west of the Bay Bridge, through to the Ridge Road interchange with Route 590. So instead of going a little bit farther north into Irondequoit, it would have a connection point at an established connection of the expressways at the southern extent of Irondequoit. And then additionally, the last alternative up there that we were looking at is a ferry operation of some sort between the Webster side and Irondequoit side. We did some preliminary evaluations for feasibility, impacts, constraints, and situations. As I mentioned on the fixed bridge, the Coast Guard governed that you had to have 75 feet of clearance for that nautical traffic. When we looked at the impacts to the area and how much of an impact it would have to the roadway, the businesses, the residences out there, and the character of the outlet area from both the Webster side and the Irondequoit side, the steering committee looked at all those and felt that those impacts were too significant to carry that alternative through for further evaluation. Similarly, the tunnel aspect, in order to get the roadway depressed and underneath the outlet, also required quite a bit of ramp network. And instead of going up and over, those ramps were going down. And that really interrupted some of the access to the businesses on both the Webster and Irondequoit side, as well as those houses. So looking at the charm and the character of the area, that similarly fell out as an alternative that was deemed not to be continued for further evaluation. Then when we look at the ferry, when you look at the staging of a vehicle, loading of a ferry, traveling of the ferry across the outlet, and then unloading, the time that that would take, a person could be in a car and drive around the outlet or around the bay to the south and get to their destination quicker than utilizing the ferry. So it really wasn't serving the purposes of the transportation connection that the study is looking for. So it was deemed to be an alternative that would not be considered for further detailed evaluation. So once those are removed, we're left with the 5 alternatives that the process carried through to that detailed evaluation and scoring to see how the impacts of those alternatives are affected and under all 11 criteria. The 5 alternatives that we were carrying forward for further consideration, again, that null alternative, the existing condition that's out there, maintaining that. Rehabilitation or retrofit of that existing swing bridge to make it movable on a more permanent year-round operation basis. Alternative C is that Route 104 connection up to Seabreeze Drive. Alternative D is a brand new movable bridge at the existing outlet. And alternative E was the Route 104 connection to the Ridge Road area. The null alternative, no change. Some of the impacts of that or considerations, there's no improvement to the year-round access or emergency access during those summer months. It would operate the way it is now. Additionally, the environmental considerations to the floodplains, the wetlands, the endangered species, noise, the impacts to properties are all no change. When we look at the outlet, a concept for what a retrofit of a movable bridge at the existing location, what that would entail to serve the nautical traffic as well as the vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic, came up with a concept, put it on paper to overlay in the area. And what this graphic is showing is Culver Road coming across the outlet to Lake Road and Webster. The existing swing bridge right here is docked in the summertime months off to the west side. The footprint of the project on the roadway here, highlighted in gray, would be the impacts of the project to allow the road where those limits of the project alternative would tie into existing. You come across here, the road would start to come up, and the new retrofit of the bridge is raised about 6 feet from what it is today. So the deck of the steel would be about 6 feet higher, and what that does is that provides 10 feet of underclearance between that bridge and the bay, which would pass approximately 75% of the boat traffic that's on the bay that goes out to the outlet. So your pleasure craft, your speed boats, fishing boats, things of that nature that are a shorter boat could get underneath that bridge without the bridge having to open. The bridge would have to open to provide access for that taller sailboats or anything with a higher ship profile above the waterway. The alternative then ties down over here on the east side at about that limit. Parking lots and some of the on-street parking and sidewalks, there would have to be some grading operations there to allow everything to tie in because that roadway is coming up to meet the bridge. So that's the description of the physical impact of that alternative. When we look at those 11 criteria, some of the highlights of the impacts or considerations is that a movable bridge at that location would provide improved access for all modes of transportation at the outlet location. Because it's mostly contained in a situation where the location of the existing bridge has already disturbed the area and is already present, there's moderate environmental impacts related to the construction activities. It's least likely to affect the watersheds, the endangered species, the wetlands, the floodplains in that area. There would be partial acquisition to 5 of the neighboring properties, some of which are municipally owned. There is a park that New York State Office of Parks operates on the west side, the Bay Marine Park. They own property on both the north and south side of Culver Road in that area. Their property would be affected to allow for sidewalks to come in. There would be some minor impacts to the properties on the east side. There's the on-street parking on the north side of Lake and Mayor's Marina on the south side. And when I say minor impacts, this is about a 4 to 5 foot strip adjacent to the existing roadway that would be necessary to allow for grading of sidewalks and that approach work to tie back in. So the property acquisitions in that area are relatively constrained against the existing roadway. And it's the land. It's not a complete acquisition of those properties. This alternative, when screened, provides a potential for improved economic impacts to the businesses in both sides of the outlet, the Webster and Irondequoit side. This alternative would come with the cost of increased operation and maintenance costs. In order to make the bridge movable, it would have to be staffed with personnel to operate the bridge, to open it up, both on a recurring cycle or in case of an emergency on the bay or on the lake where nautical traffic had to come through. And anything that moves comes with an additional maintenance cost to keep the gears, the motors, things of that nature going. Because it's a similar bridge to what's out there today and its only change is how it is operated and that it's slightly higher, there's a minimal change to the aesthetics of the area. The nature and the profile as it relates to the waterways stays fairly consistent to what's out there today. So it's a minimal aesthetic change. With this alternative and that slight vertical increase, noise considerations would need to be analyzed down the road if a project were to come of this, and that would have to be deferred until later when you have actual traffic data and actual time of construction. The noise analysis and traffic studies have to be done within a certain time of when a project is going to be built. That way it's valid data and suits the needs of the community. And whatever agency that was leading a project would be responsible for doing the study and determining the significance of the impacts or mitigations that would be required as part of that. Floodplain considerations, as we all know, the lake and the bay are within a floodplain, a designated floodplain, and this summer has seen its fair share of water. When we look at this project in that designated floodplain, because the roadway and the bridge is already where it is technically outside the effects of the floodplains. They encroach near the floodplains, but this alternative would have minimal impacts to the change of that floodplain because it would be built within the same footprint of what's out there today. So it wouldn't have a big significance one way or the other from a floodplain standpoint. Moving the alternatives out of order just because it's at the same area, moving into a brand new movable bridge When we look at it, it's the same footprint because it's a new structure at the same elevation, and the only change between this one and a retrofit is the mechanics of what goes into that bridge. So it's the same exact footprint, same exact impacts from a geometric standpoint. Screening it again, very similar to the other alternative I just discussed as far as how this alternative would affect the area. That doesn't wash out. So just looking at what a new movable bridge looks like, in this case, the one that we're looking at is called a rolling lift. It's where the steel structure of the bridge, the girder structure, spans the outlet, has a counterweight on one side, and when the bridge needs to open, the mechanism, the motors engage the bridge, and that counterweight tilts to one side, lifting the span of the bridge up, providing that unfettered access to the outlet. So there's unfettered vertical clearance for those tall ships to get in and out. To make that work, when we talk about raising that profile up about 6 feet, that's bringing the approach road work up on about a 5% grade across the outlet and back down. So that's what's establishing those eastern and western limits for the alternatives to tie in. When you look at nationwide standards of how a movable bridge operates and the time it takes, there's a process that goes along with it. Lowering of the safety gates to stop vehicle traffic, the signals associated with that go to red. Very similar to like a railroad crossing. You stop the vehicle traffic. That process going from green to red takes about 90 seconds. Lifting the bridge up or swinging the bridge out of the way under that retrofit operation takes about a minute and a half as well. Boat traffic, the marine traffic, would have about 2 minutes to navigate through the outlet. Then the bridge would close in about a minute and a half. The signals going back to green is a slightly quicker process than when you close it off. It takes about 30 seconds. So that whole operation, from when the signals start to go to red to when they go to green and the vehicle traffic can go, is about 7 minutes in duration.
Thanks, Rick. So, obviously with that, the bridge opening, there's going to be some delay to vehicles that want to cross over the outlet while that bridge is open. And what we've done is we've kind of developed an estimate of how long those queues are going to extend when the bridge is up. So how far traffic is going to back up along Culver Road and on Lake Road. And to kind of step back a little bit here, this is kind of going back to our first public meeting when we talked about how much traffic uses the bridge now and what the traffic is like around in the area. Right now, this is in 2010, there's about 5,000 cars that cross over the bridge. We did some counts in March of last year, and that number is about 5,300 now. And you can see some of the traffic on the surrounding roadways going all the way down to Route 104. When the bridge is closed, you can see that traffic significantly drops on the northern ends of the roadways along, somebody owes $1. On the roads on the northern end, and then there's slightly more traffic on Route 104. We did find, going back in previous traffic, when the bridge was open all year round, that summertime traffic is about 50% higher than when during the fall and winter months. So there is a slight increase in traffic during that time frame. So when this bridge, if there was a full bridge in place during the summer, we would expect between 7,500 and 8,000 cars going over that bridge. Per day, yes. So what we did was, now with that information, we took a look at two conditions. We took a look at the off-peak season conditions, which would be like your typical spring or fall day, and we also took a look at the summertime, what the queues would be. These are the estimated queue lengths during the off-peak hours. And what we took a look at the time frame of approximately 7 a.m. to about 9 p.m. at night, so about 14 hours. And within that 14 hours, there's 3 or 4 hours in that day where traffic is the highest. And then during the other 10 or 11 hours, it drops off significantly. And what we did is we averaged what the queue lengths would be during those time frames. So during the off-peak hours on a typical weekend during the fall or spring months, on the westbound side, you would have traffic that would be about, we queue back about 600 feet, and on the eastbound side, and about 600 feet too. When that arm goes up, it's going to take about a minute for that last car in line to get over the bridge. So you got a delay of about 60 seconds. So during the average weekday, the peaks are a little different during the weekdays. During the weekdays, your peak hours are about 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., your typical commuter hours. On the weekends, it's really generally between like 12 and 3 during the peak hours, during the peak times of the afternoon. So during the weekdays, the queues are a little longer because traffic volumes are a little higher. Again, you're around 650 to 700 feet. Now, this is during the summer months. So during the summer, during the off-peak hours, on a typical weekend, you would have, during the peak times, you would have a queue of about 1,200 cars, or 1,200 feet on the westbound side, and on the eastbound side, about 1,100 feet. So the queues essentially doubled during the summer when compared to the off-peak hours. And then during the weekdays, you would have queues back about 400 feet. And what the green lines represent is how far back those queues would extend. So that's really what you're showing. And then that time, it would take about that last car, again, 2 minutes to cross over the bridge once that gate went up again. So, but there is ways to mitigate these peak hour queues, and a number of locations across the United States that have movable lift bridges, they have a regular schedule when the bridge is open and when the bridge is closed, and that's a published thing, and everybody knows when it is. And at some of those locations, during the peak hours of traffic flow, the bridge stays closed for 2 or 3 hours continuously, and won't let traffic through the boat traffic through. So that would be one of the things that could be discussed with the Coast Guard, is if one of these movable bridge options were to come to fruition, that during these peak time frames that, we would want the bridge to stay closed to allow vehicle traffic to cross over during those time frames.
Thanks. And again, that coordination with the Coast Guard would occur when an actionable project were to be developed in the future. Again, similar to the noise analysis and other environmental studies that would have to be done at the time with current traffic and current conditions and regulations in place a few years down the road. Moving to another alternative that for consideration, the Route 104 connection to Seabreeze Drive. Some of the impacts and concerns for this have dated back to when the original Bay Bridge was put in place, and those stub ramps on the west side of the bay were built as part of that project back in the 60s. They live out there today, not connecting to anything. Looking at that as a touchdown point and coming back to the Titus Ave area, when you look at it, there's some physical constraints out there that need to be factored into the evaluation. I just want to touch on some of them here. There is approximately 75 feet of elevation change from those ramps to that Titus Ave intersection. It's a vertical change. You come up, the Irondequoit roadway network is 75 feet higher than those ramps. There's a certain horizontal distance that those ramps could be configured, and current accepted design criteria for expressway ramps limit those approach roadways to a 5% upgrade or downgrade, and that allows for safe operations of the traffic as they negotiate through there. So we can't change the 75 feet of elevation, so we need to provide that horizontal distance to mitigate and get to that under 5%. So the alignment that's shown here, coming off of those stub ramps down by 104, through the valley, behind Sunrise Crescent neighborhood, just to the east of that intersection, through the Titus Avenue extension roadway, coming up to a mid-block connection with Seabreeze Drive, just north of Titus, allows for that extended length that would be necessary to provide those ramps at a 5% network, or a 5% grade, I'm sorry. In order to facilitate that, the roadway of Titus Avenue extension would be constructed as a bridge, and the ramps would be coming underneath that, then making that connection to the north. Those vehicles there are some of the forecasted traffic that would be going through that type of intersection, because we had to go through and do an analysis of the traffic operations down here. A little over 8,000 cars a day going northbound, 3,500 cars per day on the northbound and southbound ramps all go into the mix for that mid-block intersection, evaluated as a stop sign control, and it doesn't operate in an acceptable level under this condition. So we looked at a signal at that location and found that that could allow that intersection to operate at an acceptable level of service. Other things to note with this one, there would be approximately 17 full property acquisitions to facilitate this construction to the east of Seabreeze Drive in that Titus Avenue extension. That's to provide the space for those ramps to come through. Another consideration is this alternative does not provide a direct connection for the pedestrian and bicyclist population that would be utilizing it, due to the fact that the Bay Bridge does not allow for peds or bikes to cross over the bay at that area, as well as the extended distance between those points at the outlet between Webster and Arundecoit. When we move on to the other alternative, which is the Route 104 connection to Ridge Road, what we're looking at here is this is 104 westbound and 104 eastbound. These are 590 north and southbound in that area. Arundecoit's to the north, points Penfield City to points south. Would require a new ramp off of 104 westbound, coming down and merging with the existing 590 off-ramp to Ridge Road, navigate through that intersection to the east, head up the 590 on-ramp to the north, and continue on. And there would be an on-ramp from the 590 to 104 eastbound to provide those connections. And circulation of traffic would look like this. If you're coming from Webster heading to Arundecoit, you would travel 104 westbound, take that new ramp up, go through the intersection, a left, another left, and head on up into Arundecoit. If you're heading in the other direction from Arundecoit to Webster, you would come down 590, use the off-ramp from 590 to Ridge Road, go through the same two intersections, go up 590 north onto that new slip ramp to allow you access to 104 east and out towards the Webster area. Considerations for this, again, all those ramp networks would be limited to that 5% grade change. There's a lot of grade change going on in this area as 590 goes over 104, and then you got the approach to Ridge Road and the road networks in that area. This, to get that distance to provide those ramps, both of the existing bridges that carry 590 over 104 westbound would have to be reconstructed to provide space for that off-ramp from 104 to the roadway network at Ridge Road. Similarly, for this option, the pedestrians and bicyclists are not accommodated because of the restrictions on the Bay Bridge. This alternative does not require any property acquisitions, as all the roadway networks could be constructed within the interchange itself and the existing municipal right-of-way. There would also be minimal environmental impacts, as it's a roadway network now, and all the construction would occur within that disturbed footprint. Travel demand model. It's a roadway network analysis tool that is run for the county, and it looks at origin and destination and the quickest paths for people to travel. It was utilized on all of these alternatives, and when we look at this one, it indicated that the access that is provided by this alternative connects Webster to the points in southern Arundecoit. That people would not be making that turn that I had displayed with the yellow arrows, making that turn and making an actual connection to points in northern Arundecoit, or conversely going the other way from northern Arundecoit to Webster. What that indicates is that people would be using the existing travel patterns, Culver Road, the existing 104 on-ramps, those points of connection in their travels. So this, when we look at it and we score it against the connection and improved access, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, it does not score as well because it's not providing that direct connection for northern Arundecoit and northern Webster. Once we had conceptual projects or conceptual alternatives, that would fit those 5 criteria. We went through and evaluated the construction costs, what the operation and maintenance costs would be for each of the alternatives, major rehabilitation costs that would be necessary to repair and keep the whatever alternative it is working for the next 75 years. We forecasted all these improvements out for a 75-year comparison cycle. We looked at right-of-way acquisition costs, the process to purchase property necessary for an alternative, as well as the value of those properties. Looked at project development costs, the engineering, the studies, the actual construction inspection, the methodologies that would be necessary to build a project. We scoped those costs for each of the alternatives. No alternative. Alternative B, rehabilitating the existing swing bridge at the location. Alternative C, that connection from 104 to Seabreeze Drive. Alternative D, a new movable bridge, that rolling lift bridge at the outlet. And alternative E, the 104 to Ridge Road connection, and the costs are summarized there. Again, just to highlight, at this point, only this study has been funded. A further project has not been funded and is not on the books to be constructed. So when we take all of those alternatives and all the data that we found, we put it into that scoring, statistical scoring criteria, the weighted average factor. What this chart is trying to show, and I hope it's legible to everyone in the room, but if it's not, I'll try to go over it here. We have our 11 criteria that was established by the culmination of the stakeholder meeting and the 2 public information meeting and survey, when we pulled all that together to establish that ranking from what the process indicated was the most important criteria down to the least important criteria from a priority standpoint. That's ranked 1 through 11. Then we take our 5 alternative and list them down through on the left-hand side. Within each of those criteria, a weighted scoring of 1, 2, or 3 was established for all of them. 1 being the most beneficial to the project in meeting the objectives, or the least impact to that particular criteria. So from a cost standpoint, the lower the cost, the better. The higher the cost, the worst. So that would be a 1 is the best, a 2 is a no change or a middle of the road scoring criteria, and a 3 is a poor or highest impact type criteria. So we went through all the 11 criteria, looked at the ranges, and developed those scores. No alternative does not improve any of the year-round access because it doesn't change anything out there, so that score is a 3 as an example. When we carry that all the way through, the statistics are you take the weight of the factor times the score for each of the 11 and then add those up, and the lowest score ends up ranking the best. So that's how the process was developed to establish the ranking priority for the criteria of the alternatives that were evaluated. Because it may be difficult to read, the outcome of this is that alternative B, rehabilitating the existing swing bridge, scored a total aggregate score of 102. The next lowest score was attributed to a new movable bridge at that outlet, scoring 108. The no alternative, doing nothing, retaining what's out there, scores a 122. Making that connection, alternative E, that connection from Route 104 to Ridge Road, scores a 139. And alternative C, Route 104 to Seabreeze Drive, ends up scoring a 144. So that was the outcome of the scoring process. So what are the next steps? As Roseanne mentioned, we're going to be finalizing the draft final report, providing that to both municipalities so it can be out for public review and comment over the next couple weeks. That'll be at the town halls, the town libraries, and then also posted online. So that summarizes that. And now we'll open it up for questions and answers. There is going to be a process, just because we are recording this evening. What we will ask is we have some portable microphones that will be going around to help moderate and to make sure that the questions are heard or the comments are heard. and also recorded for follow-on broadcast on the town's website, or, yeah.
Hi there, folks. So I'm going to have the microphone. We promise we're going to get to everyone. So anybody who has a question or wants to make a comment, there'll be certainly an opportunity. Although I love this microphone, I promise I'll share it. What I'm going to do is if anybody wants to make a comment, has a question, throw your hands up. I will get to you, I promise. And so I'm going to go to the gentleman I saw first, and it's right here in the back. So this will show that being at the front, although that makes you a good student, doesn't always get you the first call.
She also made a bad assumption that I'm a gentleman, but that's okay. We'll take it. I had a quick question and then kind of a comment. What's the existing pitch of the 104 westbound after you cross the bay before you come up the hill? You said it can't be more than a 5-degree on any of the new construction, like the ramps. It seems that that's steeper than that currently. And you may not know the answer. That's okay.
Are you referring to the mainline 104
the
traffic?
existing 104 westbound from the end of the bridge to its highest point, which is under Ridge Road, seems steeper than a 5-degree
So
currently.
we do have that information. We don't have it here tonight
That's
in
fine.
all the record
I'm
plans.
just
And
curious.
unfortunately, that particular number is not stored in my.
That's okay. I'm glad it's not.
But
I will
Oh.
point out that, the Rondequoit Bay Bridge was built in the 60s, and design standards change frequently. And so the 5% grade is current design standards. So at the time that structure was built, I don't know what the standard was, but it could have been steeper and become more stringent over time. So the 5% is the current standard.
Okay. So the little comment piece was in regards to the traffic usage of Seabreeze Parkway or 590 North there and how many people would use it. There are a lot of intangibles, I think, to having the on-ramps down on Ridge Road in terms of the congested traffic, or if there's an accident at Goodman and 104, Culver and 104, which carries an inordinate amount of traffic through Ridge Road, Culver Road intersection that might not be there at all if you had the two on-ramps. And it's difficult for me to believe that any east-west traffic trying to avoid 104, for example, Titus, would actually go north on 590, turn around at that proposed stop sign or light, and come all the way back. So I think you have, if you do the ramps up to Ridge Road, you probably have a nice alternative route that eases congestion on Culver or Goodman and 104, where you don't have it if you tie in north of the Titus Circle.
thank you for the comment.
All right, I'm going to go back. I think I'm going to go I'm going to go right here. You had your hand up, yes?
I guess I have a couple of questions. During the fire that was in Webster several years ago, the fire department was called. I know people are interested in safety, but the fire department that responded to that was Webster Fire Department. Am I correct?
Yeah,
Even though Seabreeze was located less than a mile away. From what I understand is that you can't overlap. In other words, if I'm living in Webster and I call for a fire department, they're definitely not going to send Seabreeze. Even though it's a mile away, they're going to send Webster. So the safety thing as far as fire departments go, unless there would be a change made for that, that wouldn't affect anything to do with safety. You're going to get your ambulance, you're going to get your fire departments from the same place you're getting them now.
sure.
The other thing is, you stated that there's probably 5,000, maybe 6,000 cars a day that are using this particular road. Those 6,000 cars are doubled because those people are using that same route. I'm going to say probably 90% of them are using the same route on the way home. So you're confusing apples with oranges. If you got 7,000 cars or 5,000 cars, you've actually only got 2,300 that are actually using it.
Yep.
Am I correct?
So, two questions there, and I'll answer the second point first, and then I'll get to the emergency
Okay.
access. The numbers that we presented, that about 5,000 trips, those are individual crossings of a car. So whether it's, if a person goes one way in the morning for the morning commute and comes back, that's two of those 5,000 trips that we have. So it's a static count of how many cars are crossing that point in a given day. So whether it's the commuter traffic it would have, so it would be, for round numbers, it would be 2,500 people making that round trip across that point in those 5,000 that we have. So that answer, or addresses that in those numbers, and that's carried through all the traffic data that we have in here. When we talk about the emergency access and emergency locations, you're correct in that the geographic area establishes who that initial responder is, but there are mutual assistance agreements in place between Arundecoit and Webster for fire services that only occur when that bridge is in place. They sever that agreement during those summertime months because the response time around the south precludes them from providing that support. So they get that mutual support for those large fires or those large incidents from somewhere else.
My understanding is police.
Yes.
My understanding, and I'm just going to jump in. My understanding is that fire and police support from the Arundecoit side were provided during that event. And,
After,
no, but in response to the call for service came.
yes. Correct.
Correct, but mutual aid, if
Well,
needed, can come from any direction that's available to them. And that goes in any town, so that if there's an emergency someplace and they need additional support or help. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, duly noted, and that is incorporated in the report.
I promise I'm gonna get around.
Robert Bennett Webster. My question is regarding the two bridge replacement options. The first one was a rehab of the existing bridge, and the second one was the swing bridge. Both had the two best scores from your presentation, correct?
Yes.
So my question is, the more expensive bridge was the new swing bridge. The lift bridge,
Lift.
whatever you want to call it, the new lift. And it scored the score was slightly higher than rehab of what's there.
Correct.
My question is, we're looking at 75-year replacement here. Would it be more feasible to go with that lift-type bridge, which costs more and is seemingly the not as favorable option, considering we have no idea 75 years down the road what we may need to get through that channel?
I think ultimately that is a decision for the municipalities to make after this report is combined and they decide to take action on one of the alternatives or a solution and start to secure that funding mechanism as it goes forward. What this does is give a relative weighting of these alternatives so the decision makers could make that decision.
All right, I'm gonna head back here, and then I'll be back.
Your presentation was excellent, by the way. Thank you very much. My first comment is you seem to have figured out the problem. I can see of refitting the bridge that's already there at a lower cost. I think that was $16 million. It's already in place. It has less problems concerning the areas on both sides of the bridge, and it probably could be done a lot faster than rebuilding something, a lift bridge and such. And I don't think that was in your study, what could be done as quickly as what we have now. So this might be actually a dramatic, quick impact on the economic availability for the northern part of Arundecoit and also the northern part of Webster. But that time element wasn't brought into it, which I think is a significant factor. The other factor is I totally agree with your concept and your presentation, but the thing is, what's the next step? And Mr. Seeley would probably answer that for me. Okay? Thank you.
Just to touch briefly on the time duration and costs, in the essence of trying to be brief in presenting the information here, when we look at those evaluation criteria and the costs that went into that last slide, those durations for those administrative and development costs, We did look at how long it would take to potentially develop and construct a project like this and the duration. And those bridges up there are in that neighborhood of a full construction season or a full into the winter time, depending on rules that the Coast Guard would set for doing work near the water. So we did take a look at that to help develop those construction costs and those development costs so that we were comparing all these projects together. As a point of comparison, the Route 104 connection to Seabreeze or 104 to Ridge Road would be a multiple year construction estimated because of the amount of impacts to the bridges and things of that nature down there. So we did look at those time.
I'm sorry. What is the time element between the ones, the lift bridge and the swing bridge? Did you come up with an estimate of how long it would take to get this in action and done?
They are very similar in that the scope and area that they're being built in, taking the one out of service and building the new takes about the same time, whether you're reutilizing the steel that's there or putting in all new steel. It's in the neighborhood of one full construction season or one winter and that construction season combined based off those rules that when we could get into the water to do the work.
I'm going to ask for any hands back here, or I'm just going to go lazy and go close.
First is a comment, second is a question about the study. First is there was comments about pedestrian, bicycles, things like that nature. I find that to be a little odd that we're concerned about that when neither side have sidewalks. So, I mean, you want to add 8,000 cars a day crossing, and that's great that we have a sidewalk on the bridge, but we have no sidewalks on either side. So I'm not sure how the bikes or the people are supposed to get there safely. But then a question about your study is you showed the backup queue for cars for either of the bridge replacement options. Has the study been done on what the backup for boats would look like? Because I really feel you're going to have a significant safety concern given the water flow and things like that, plus the distance to Mayor's Marina right there, plus the public boat launch. I just think that a study really needs to be done on what it would look like with all of those boats trying to wade safely you're looking at, 7 to 10 minutes. Well, no, yeah, while it actually physically happens.
Right.
So who knows how long
Right.
boats would be waiting for it to open. I'm just saying that that really needs to be part of your study.
So in the background of the study, some of those numbers have been incorporated into it. So when I talked about raising that bridge up about 6 feet to allow 75% of the existing traffic on the bay and lake to traverse without that bridge needing to open is one of those aspects to help mitigate the impact to the boating traffic. And as Tim mentioned, publishing that opening schedule for when the bridge will be open to allow nautical traffic helps not only the traveling public and the cars, but those boaters know that if I need to cross through, I need to be there at, say, 7 a.m. because the bridge is going to be open. So they queue up and they wait. So when that bridge opens, they're accommodated, those taller ships. And that is kind of the way the operation and procedures for these type of movable bridges are handled. Similarly, if you've ever been down and looked at the intercoastal down south, that is how an awful lot of these work. The lift bridge in Fairport, some of the bridges have to, queue up and wait while the boats need to queue up and wait while that bridge opens on a particular cycle. So that is built into this, looking at what is that impact, and that is part of those considerations as to what the geometry of these alternatives have been built into. And I think that was your question.
Okay, I'm going to come back here and I'll make my way back up again.
Hi, my name's Dave Malecki. I'm a Webster resident, have been for roughly 20 years. Prior to that, I lived in West Irondequoit for about 10 years and other parts of Monroe County. Now, where I live in West Webster, from a transportation standpoint, the benefits to Route 104 improvements there on the Irondequoit side would improve car access. However, that's really not my primary focus because I enjoy riding my bicycle, specifically riding it around Irondequoit Bay. So from a recreation standpoint, I really like Plan B, and I applaud Irondequoit's effort to do this study. And I would certainly like you to proceed on that as soon as possible. All right. this impacts more than just Arundecoit and Webster, and I see that there's really not much input here from the town of Webster. They don't seem to have agreed to even put this information on their website. I'd like some response from the Webster supervisor standing here about that.
We were very happy to join the other stakeholders in this, and let's go back a little bit. For 3 years here, George Winter is here, attended the Genesee Transportation meetings there to get this grant in the first place. So it was because of George and his persistence that he went to the Genesee Transportation Council on my behalf to look for an alternative off of the Bay Bridge. That's what we were looking for to spur economic development between the town of Webster and the town of Arundecoit. We were looking to do that because every time I go across that bridge, those things don't go anywhere, and they should go someplace. So we did that, and there was, I don't know if it's $65,000 or $75,000 allowed by the Genesee Regional Transit, or not Genesee, I forget what it is, Transportation Council, and they made Arundecoit the lead agency on this study. So Webster stood back. We've been attending these meetings, and we've been coming here, but they made Arundecoit the lead agency on this. Got it right so far, Dave? So we're there. So we're here tonight. You've been pushing too. For what? We're for doing something. Webster's always been for doing something. What, personally, I am concerned about, you went over the 5 parcels there. I'm concerned for anybody on the Webster side that's going to lose their house. Anybody that's going to lose their house, and to Maris Marina. Okay?
So, with that, and we'll keep going, I just would like to point out, the impacts of the alternatives as they're presented here do not cause any loss of any of the full properties in and around the outlet there, on the Arundecoit or the Webster side. It's small parcels where the parking is near the roadway.
So that would affect Maris Marina.
Small little strip across Mayor's
That's
Marina.
all his property, where he parks.
No
Okay.
parking would be affected from this alternative
Okay.
on Mayor's Marina.
What he does is, and that's another concern when you go through your analysis of transportation, he does a heck of a business in the summertime.
Understood?
Trucks, cars with boats. That's 2 cars. When the boats come down Bay Road and they want to launch, it's not 1 car, it's a car and a boat slip. Okay, did you take that into consideration? Because that's all going to back up in your 7 minutes when that bridge comes up for people coming down Bay Road that want to launch their boat at Maris Marina. The other thing about that is, if you talk to the county yet, there's a lot of discussion in Webster about taking the 4 lanes away from Bay Road into 2 lanes into the future. So that is going to be another thing that's going to back up the traffic coming down to Lake Road over to that bridge. Okay? Now we talk about pedestrian. Anybody on the way home to Webster tonight, going across that bridge, you see how wet it is. There's no shoulders on that road whatsoever. None. And we got water all over the place. This winter, when we had the problems, we closed the road because the water's too high. It's going over the top. Okay? How are we going to get to the bridge if that happens again? So we have a lot of concerns in Webster. Sir, it's not that I don't care. I've been on top of it. But we have allowed the study to take place. I made some comments the other day. I will continue to make comments and stand up for my constituents. Okay? But we have concerns. And we have some diagrams here tonight that we'd like to present to you because we think you might be off a little bit on your 5% grade there and how we can get there without taking out 17 houses on the Arundecoit side. Okay?
I would just like to respond momentarily. I'm Jim Stack. I'm the Executive Director of the Genesee Transportation Council. We did provide funding for the study. If we go back a ways, the town of Arundecoit had approached us looking at an active transportation study. They also had concerns about the Seabreeze area, but at the time, we just didn't feel there would be enough in the budget to do justice to the Seabreeze area. So my predecessor worked with the town officials and said, what are you trying to accomplish? The town of Arundecoit repackaged their proposal, and they came back to us and said, we want to look at the Seabreeze area, as noted earlier with the criteria, the year-round access. This was a study of looking at the Seabreeze area. It was never a study of looking at the economic impacts of the ramps on 104. The town of Arundecoit came to us and said, we want to do this study. We would like transportation funds to help us. We are putting up our own cash to do it. The town of Webster has not come and asked for those funds. So I can't say that GTC assigned Arundecoit the lead. Arundecoit came to us and asked for assistance, and we've worked with them to look at the Seabreeze area.
Thank you, Jim.
I promise, I'm making my way back up, I promise.
Just the point that I want to throw in, being a Webster resident, I understand what the other gentleman had to say with respect to riding a bicycle across, but as it is, when you can go across that bridge, the traffic and the speed people are driving, it's scary just to walk, to even try and walk down Lake Road or Bay Road. It's crazy, the traffic coming through and how they drive. I live not too far away from there. Also, I've been involved with EMS for 28 years, and I just don't find the response time that significantly different, responding to problems on lake. I mean, had just finished ambulance with Penfield and couldn't make it over, tried to make it over there, but they had already blocked off Lake Road, so I couldn't get over to help. It's just crazy having access across there year round, what it will do residentially to the people in Webster. I mean, you don't have that huge a residential area right significantly on the other side. It's basically a little bit more commercial with Seabreeze and those things. Yeah, you've got some houses on the lake, but not to the level that is on the other side. And it's scary to think of a full-time bridge there.
Thank you.
I promised I was going to get back here, and I thank you.
I just had a question about the retrofitting of the bridge, because you showed a drawing of the proposed lift bridge. Can you explain further what the retrofit how it would really function? Because if it's still going to function as the swing bridge the way that it does now, I mean, I've seen them, move that, and it's no small feat. So can you explain what the retrofitting would really entail?
Sure, and that's a question, so I can answer. That's difficult to show in a picture at this stage. What it would be is using the steel deck and the girders that support what's called the superstructure, the roadway network they swing in place. What would happen is that would be removed, the grades of the roadway would be brought up to provide that underclearance, and all brand new abutments, the housings, the seating of where that bridge would sit would all be new, as well as the controls and mechanisms and motors to swing that and the gearing that's necessary to swing that, so it can operate in that 7-minute cycle as opposed to the 90 minutes to 2 hours that it takes currently. So that's part of that retrofit and rehabilitation, is getting those new state-of-the-art controls and mechanisms in place to allow it to open at a easier and quicker pace.
I'm going to come right here.
I have a statement and 2 questions. First off, I'm wondering if traffic calming has been part of this process. That people do drive crazy through that area, and if you just put a bridge in there, they can now drive through fast all the time as opposed to slowing them down a little bit. So I don't know if that's been part of this process. The other thing is, when I looked at the numbers, you had the steering committee weighted the same as the input from the online and the
people that were
At a
part of the
public
charrettes or whatever. So I just wonder why they were weighted equally, because they could have been erroneous in their decision-making process. They weren't vested, I guess. So I guess that's a question. And then the other one was, did you actually come up with a calculation of, for the dollars, which is getting the most benefit? That you have rated each thing, but then did you evaluate for the cost, which one had the most benefit per dollar spent?
So, those, I believe, three
Well,
questions.
it was three. I thought it was a statement, but it turned out to be a question. That's why I was lost a little bit.
I get to it. Inherent in any project is always looking to incorporate current design standards, things like complete streets philosophy, traffic calming measures, to put current technologies in place or engineering controls to facilitate all of the needs in a roadway. So cars, peds, bikes, and help with those engineering controls to look at getting the traveling public to operate the way we want them to on our roadways. So inherent in any of these alternatives is that underlying adaptation of traffic calming and things like that. When we look at these particular alternatives, they are confined to right at the outlet for the two movable bridges and then the geometry for 104 to Seabreeze and 104 to Ridge Road. So on a conceptual level, those elements are inherently in there. If a project were to be selected and to move forward into an actionable project, those elements would be detailed out and look to be incorporated in a more concrete manner to help with those. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's in there, but there's not significantly a saying that, okay, if we're going to do this, we need to do some type of control at a different intersection or start to look at bump outs. That narrative is not in the geometry of this, but it's incumbent at an actionable project that would be vetted out for the traffic calming. When we look at the weighting, the process to establish those evaluation criteria, you noticed steering committee was one group, and then the two segments of the public were the other two. So the steering committee ended up contributing, when you average it out, for 33% of that overall score, and the public did as well. And if we go back to the slide or you get into the report, the public's weighting of those priorities is much more in line with the final outcome because they were contributing 66% of that statistics. So using your thoughts of who are the vested individuals, the public weight, accounts for 66% of it. And I will say the stakeholders are also vested in that they are the agencies that are responsible for the infrastructure and the roadways out here. Their underlying goal is to provide the best infrastructure and the best network for the constituents. So they are vested. They may come at it from a slightly different vantage point from operating the roadways, but they are vested in it. So the process, looking at how to best establish objective criteria for this, is the outgrowth of that public participation. And the report kind of bears that out. So I think that's two. When you look at the benefit cost ratio, some reports will do a true benefit cost ratio of the alternatives. The way this report was scoped and developed from the beginning, that was rolled into a particular evaluation criteria. When you start looking at the project costs or the improved access, they're split up into two different ones. And when they're weighted, that ultimately gets to that concept of a benefit cost ratio, but it's not this report didn't have that true mathematic analysis that I think you're asking for, but the methodology is built into this study. So in a way, it's in there. It's like ragu sauce. It's in there, So.
Who'd have a question? All right, I'm going to head this way. So I'm going to, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm Jay Watson. I live on the Webster side, and I'm not sure, to Ron's point, that you're aware of how narrow that lake road is for walking, biking, or running. And when people come off now, currently, and they come across that bridge, and they see that straightaway, they're going 50 miles an hour by the time they get to my house, which is the 16th house on the Webster side. Okay. That's number one. Number two, good luck with the Coast Guard. on closing that for 2 hours. We know how treacherous Lake Ontario is. And when there's a big storm on the lake, those boats come flying in. And if you close it for 2 hours, somebody's going to get killed.
And just to address that aspect of it, the operation cycle would be a non-emergency, non-weather event type situation. It would be a program thing. All bets are off in emergency conditions, and the Coast Guard most likely would rule that if there's a declared weather event or something of that nature, the bridge would go up and those boats would come in, and the cars would have to sacrifice, even if it wasn't part of the agreed upon schedule. So in the event of an emergency, the seafaring traffic, the nautical traffic would take precedence. That's usually how those type of jurisdictional agreements that the Coast Guard levies out there or agrees to accommodate that situation.
Okay.
We're gonna,
Third,
we'll get to you.
Third
but-
one, I have one more comment here. Your time frame as to the emptying of the roadway during the summertime is way off. You haven't taken into account the boats that Ron mentioned going down to launch at the marina, turning left into the marina if you're heading to the west. If you've got a line of traffic coming west and going east, that line on the Webster side is going to sit there forever because you got boats that want to turn left into the marina to launch. And what happens when the line backs up in the marina and now you've got cars with boats sitting out there on the Webster side waiting to turn in? You're going to block traffic.
Now, what I'll say to
Not
that-
with, if the bridge isn't open in the summertime, if cars can't come across in the summertime, it's backed up past my house as it is now.
and appreciate the comment. And with that, the through traffic and that operations have been built into the model from the forecasted traffic that we have available. Operations in and out of parking lots, businesses, the boat launch on the west side in Arundecoit, those type of operational considerations may need to change from what's out there today, because right now it's a cul-de-sac road in the summertime. And how those boats wait in the traffic to make that left, the project that would go forward would work through the details of that aspect. I know you're chuckling at, but I understand. We have heard that information. We sat down and spoke with the operators of Mayor's Marina at length about the impacts of this, any potential alternative to their operations and how it would work. Geometrically and access can be provided with this alternative. How those boats come in, the trailers, how they stage and where they stage, and that operations would have to be integrated into that project. And the studies and analysis show that it could.
And also part of the benefit of having a published schedule of when the bridge would open and close would be so that the public, particularly boaters who maybe wanted to launch at Mayor's, or even on the other, the Arundecoit Bay Marine Park side, could gauge their schedule accordingly. So if, say, they knew the bridge was going to open at 1 o'clock, that they made sure that they got down there at 12:30. So that's the benefit of having a published schedule, is that the public can adjust and react accordingly. Not that there won't be those people that end up showing up down there at that time, but there are going to be some people that do avoid going down there at that time and get there during the times when the bridge would not be opening.
Hello. I'd like to just continue to add to the safety concerns associated with the fact that the bridge be open for boat traffic for about 7 minutes, and then the backup of traffic would take another 2 minutes. So you're talking 9 to 10 minutes for traffic to clear. So that means for the this is a bigger deal, and Ron is speaking for his Webster constituents, because the traffic's going to back up on the north side of the road in Webster, blocking all the homeowners that live there. But on the Arundecoit side, it's going to back up on the south side where there are no houses. So this actually has a much bigger impact to Webster people than it does to Arundecoit people. And from a safety standpoint, you're talking 10 minutes, you're talking 15% of the time of every hour the residents that live along there will not be able to get out if they have an emergency, because there's going to be traffic there. And as Jay pointed out, with the boat traffic, I don't even think you're estimating the backup he's talking about for boats that want to make a left turn into Mayor's Marina, let alone what's going to be happening on the west side. On the east side, that traffic's going to back up, and it may take 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes to clear. So if it takes 6 minutes to clear and the bridge is going to be open, we may have 20 to 25% of the time where we can't get out of our houses if we have an emergency. And I would say that the likelihood of us having an emergency where we need to get out is even more likely than your safety study said for first responders, where Seabreeze and West Webster are about equidistance away. So you need to take and factor that into account when you're scoring the safety part of what you presented here, and further taking into account what Jay said about the boat traffic backing up when storms take place. Because so then you're saying that if the storm comes in and the bridge is now open for a half an hour, then the traffic's going to back up for a half an hour or longer, so the homeowners are going to be blocked into their houses even longer. Again, more of a safety concern. So I think Ron is really speaking for the residents of Webster when he's looking out for the safety concern there.
All right. This gentleman was going to be next, and I'm going to come right back again.
My name's Gary Beggy. I am the Vice President of the Genesee Charter Boat Association, and which has probably about 60 active members and quite a few associate members, that being some of your, restaurants and all that. What I wanted to know, the gentleman now just was complaining about that traffic, which traffic is not good. But what are you doing now for that? I don't know what's happening down there now with this bridge, when the bridge stays open for the boaters. How's the traffic now? I don't know. Do you think there'd be more traffic if they did the swing bridge that's quicker?
Well, excuse me, Fran. Excuse me. What I can say is on the Webster side, when the bridge is taken out of service for cars, there's a little over 1,000 cars a day or so that go up and down Lake in that stretch. On the Arundecoit side, with the marina that's there, the businesses, Seabreeze Park, that distribution comes up Culver and Seabreeze Drive, and it's heavier on that side in the summertime. But there is none of that cross traffic that goes on right now.
Okay.
Because there's no bridge there to access. I think that might be what you were trying to get at.
Yeah, and that other bridge, number C, I think it was, that has the time limit. Now, you were talking about also if there's storms or anything out there like that the Coast Guard would probably call and put something to tell them to let that bridge stay up for a while to get the boats in. Also, there's sometimes you, believe it or not, have guys out there that don't put the plug in on the boat, or they're having problems with transmission or whatever, need to get in as quick as possible.
Right.
What do you do with that? Now, if you're going to have that being a manned bridge, is he going to have a radio where somebody could call him?
So, again, right now, we only know what technologies and procedures are available today. If a project were to go forward, technologies will be whatever they will be in the future. Right now, in this study, we're looking at this. Either the movable bridge options would have to be manned and staffed. That was part of the operating and maintenance costs, is the labor of having somebody there. We scope this as having somebody there during the summertime months when the bridge would be affecting nautical traffic, similar to the condition out. When it's open, you'd have to staff it. To wintertime months, it might be a reduced staffing because the navigation traffic isn't there. Other possibilities that could be incorporated could be automated controls at the bridge with closed-circuit televisions worked back to another control point, either the Stutson Street or Rourke Bridge, or back to the RTOC. Technology will evolve by the time a project comes away. But for this analysis, we staffed it and studied it with a person there to operate, so they could have that visual concern if there was a boat in distress and be able to lift it
So
over if
that's
necessary.
24/7?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm going to come back.
Just the satellite
Sir, hang on one second. I just need you to have a mic because we're filming this. Okay.
What it looks like today.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stand up. Thank you. All right. I'm a Webster resident. I've been there for 52 years. I also own Narges, which is on its 58th year. So I'm very aware of the problems on both sides. And Mr. Nesbitt mentioned how Lake Road floods and we have trouble with it.
I'm going to hold the mic. You can wave your hands.
Oh, okay. Okay. And what he didn't mention was we don't have sewers. We have catch basins. So in the flooding this year, we were flooded right off the bat. Just because we have catch basins, they don't go anyplace. All right. 5,000 cars used to go across that bridge every day in 1985. I have all the clippings and everything to prove it. And they still had big boats then going in. They had big boats coming out. They had 2 cars for every boat. Well, we had to manage with it. That was fine. We have sidewalks on that bridge down there. If you come down in your car and park either on the Webster side or the Arundecoit side, you can walk from one side to the other. You can go out on the piers. That's why there's sidewalks on that bridge. That's why that's important. Okay. Emergency. The shooting. If that was in the summer, I got my first call at 5 o'clock in the morning saying, don't go near your doors or windows. We were not allowed to get back into our house. If it wasn't for that being in the winter, I got rescued, taken out of there by a SWAT truck that came in. I don't know if somebody laughed, but it wasn't funny. That came in out there. I didn't have time to put shoes on. I'm in slippers and nightshirt, literally. And they had me get in, but I didn't take my gun. And that there was no way. You would have been sitting in that house. Lake wasn't frozen, or bay wasn't frozen enough you could have taken that across the outlet. They knew where he was. They didn't know if he had anybody with him. You would have been sitting there. Oh, while all this is happening, at 2 o'clock when I got out of work that next night, Christmas night, or Christmas Eve night, I still had to get an escort to get back to my house, which was the other way. They were escorting him in the other way too. But as far as that goes, I cannot imagine what it would have been like down there without being able to get out. Elena came over to told me I could stay at her house once I get over there. But I mean, everybody was just in a total panic mood. As far as a man-person in the bridge, I am not sure what they have to do to man it to make it go up and down. But there is also a man-person in the parking outlet. Okay, they don't get paid exactly the same, but I'm sure with a little work, somebody could do both jobs or something. It can be worked out. And, there's talk about businesses. The impact of business on the Webster side, not that bad. They have Castaways, they have the marina, and they have Bayside. On the Arundecoit side, you've got Don and Bob's. You had Vic and Ers, but that's out because they couldn't get the business year-round. You've got Bill Gray's. You've got where Vic's was. That's out of business. You've got the hairdressers. You've got the little shed. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to get taken out in this meeting.
Job. And you've got Shamrock Jack's. You've got the great big place that draws a lot of cars up on the top of the hill and right next to the Seabreeze Drive, Seabreeze. That draws well more than any of us other ones. And me, down there. I mean, plus, 2 years ago, we had Pokemon. I mean, we got a lot more stuff going on on Arundecoid side than Webster. You can't compare them as far as businesses and backing up. And you shouldn't have to. What else? 75? Wonder what 75 is. I don't know. Okay, well, I guess that's it. But I'm definitely for Plan 2.
Sir, I'm going to just give some people in the back who haven't had a chance to speak yet, just so we are fair. Okay. And you were ahead. I will come to you, I promise.
Thank you. I'm Jake Zane. I'm a resident of Webster. My family's lived in Webster for about 6.
Excuse me, just a second. Excuse me. I'm having a hard time hearing them. If we could just...
My family's lived in Webster for about 60 years, and before that they lived in Arundecoit, where my grandfather was a Arundecoit police officer, which is kind of where my interest in this topic came up. He was very upset when they took out the bridge in the 80s. He kind of felt it was a violation of safety. It was a big safety concern. So one of the quick questions I have before I just go on my little comment is in any of these traffic studies that have happened, has anybody measured the speed of cars going down there? I know that's a common complaint from the residents. Do we know what the average speed of the cars traveling through this area is?
So, Fran, Fran. As part of this study, the speed study, there was not a discrete speed study done at this location. Part of this, we did take traffic counts in that area. As part of the rolling community-wide traffic counts and studies that are done, speed studies are incorporated in that, so there is some historic data of that, as well as what I think Fran is getting at is there are some spot enforcement issues and speeds, enforcement from either police agencies will go ahead and put speed trailers out on occasion. So there is some of that historic data, and an actionable project would have to evaluate that. For this study, we were looking at the historic traffic data, not necessarily the speeds.
I was just wondering, because to be honest with you, from my anecdotal experience being down there, which is pretty much what everybody's experience is anecdotal, cars don't really move through there that fast. I'm sure being a resident, you see the occasional lunatic flying down there. I live on a main road, so I know that, occasionally you see someone, I guess trying for the Darwin Awards or something on your street, but, it's kind of a fact of life living on a street, sadly. So, I'm in favor of the second plan. I'd love to see the connection. I'd love to be able to get over to Arundecoit easier, get on the Parkway easier, to go over to northern Greece even. And, I just think a lot of the opposition to this is from the residents, which, I have sympathy for, that, that you're going to suddenly have some more traffic. But, it does kind of make me chuckle to see the supervisor of Webster suddenly interested in local residents' concern about traffic, when often when there is a project and residents come up to voice their concern about the impact in their communities, they're often shuffled off in Webster. I actually, as part of my senior project, I had kind of originally was interested in organizing a forum between the town of Arundecoit and the town of Webster. And I met with Mr. Nesbitt in 2000 and, well, I don't want to give away what year I graduated, but I actually met with Mr. Nesbitt, and he wasn't really interested in this project at all. So it does not surprise me that Webster wasn't on the Genesee Regional Task Force, because there wasn't a lot of interest on this side, because the Webster residents that live down there are against the project. So, but a lot of and which is the reason why there isn't a lot of local people that come out, because. I brought this up to a lot of my friends that use the bridge, and it's like, why would you want to come to one of these meetings to get yelled at about how, you're a bad person because you want to support these speeding cars traveling through there? So there is a lot of support for this, and I would personally use it. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna come to you in a second. I'm just gonna go to this.
Matt Chatfield, Webster Economic Development Alliance. I have a couple questions. I really want to keep them to economics. So, Rick, in the study, when the full study is published, is it going to address the actual quantify the economic impacts of any of the alternatives? I guess the concern that I'm seeing is, and I think it's largely borne out by the comments that we're seeing in the room tonight, is anecdotally the economic benefits are weighted towards one side of the channel versus another, right? So do the benefits to one side from an economic perspective, how do we weigh those versus the potential negative impacts to the other side? And, how do we quantify that? Did you attempt to at least address that in your study? Because it is really important to the folks on the Webster side. Obviously, the business owners, especially down on Seabreeze, feel that it's going to be an economic benefit to them. And it probably would be, right? But to what cost for the people that reside on the Webster side? I can't say that I have an opinion either way, but the facts need to be borne out. I think we need to understand the economics, because it sounds like what you've done is an engineering study, but in reality, I think this is more of an economic study, because you can engineer it,
Yeah.
but does it make sense and is it fair?
So, to address that, on our team, who are not here today, we have some additional sub-consultants that assist us. One of them is HDR. They're specialists in various types of bridge alternatives, and on staff with them, and part of the team was an economic specialist who did run economic analysis for the alternatives in the area. I'm not an economist. It's one of the criteria. It's one of the scoring criteria is the economic impacts to businesses in the area, and that's both Webster and Irondequoit side. And there was an economic analysis that they ran that is in the underlying scoring for the impact to highway user costs, and as far as the delay and the cost for the residents who are traveling, and the various, time spent in car, time idling, fuel, maintenance costs, that type of analysis. And again, I am not an economist, but in understanding what the analysis that they did, it was based on census tract information, populations, interviews with some of the local businesses as far as getting anecdotal evidence for their business operations, and that was both Webster and Irondequoit side participated in that. And then they looked at sales tax data and tied that to other case studies for when you have increases in traffic, what does that impact have to your businesses in a regional distribution out from the point of study. So they did work that into that and provided that data, which allowed us to go ahead and score out these alternatives from an economic impact standpoint. And that's for the area. It's not weighted one side or the other. It's looking at the businesses that would be affected by the alternatives. As an example, the Route 104 connection to Ridge Road, because of the distribution that the travel demand model shows, scored poorly for the economic impacts to the businesses located by the outlet, while all of the other alternatives scored better because of the increase of traffic and the ease and shorter trips to get to those businesses.
Hold on one second.
Sorry, Rick, I'm going to retort. So the study is clearly only for the businesses that are surrounding the outlet. That's how it was scored.
It was scored for the travel patterns that the traffic is affected in that area. So it's not, it's looking at where those distributions are. When we look at the objectives, I brought up about the connection to the south, looking at the businesses in the outlet area, those northern areas, which is the study focus, it scored poorly against those. There is not description in there as far as what the economic impact would be for other businesses further out, because it's a micro scale analysis that they performed.
I'm going to go, you're welcome. I'm going to head back here to this gentleman, and then I'm going to head back to the front of the room.
Just quickly, I think the number you said was 8,000 you would expect during the summer, the peak travel per day?
We're basing that off of the historic, about a 50% increase. And the travel demand models kind of bear that out, that it would be from about 5,000 now to somewhere around 7,500 to 8,000 cars a day.
Once the bridge is in. So 50% more than what it is now is what in the summer is what
50% over the wintertime traffic.
Okay. So I know Fran said in '84 there was 5,000 cars a day. I just think it's going to be a huge amount of cars in the summer. It's going to be nuts.
I just have to say historically, that number is not correct. It's actually before, when the bridge was there permanently, the historic traffic on that stretch was over 10,000 cars a day. That was the base condition in the early 80s.
Yeah, so it's going to be much more, I would think. Webster is a lot bigger than it was in the 80s.
But, Fran, please. What also goes into consideration in this when we look at the travel demand model is other changes in the travel destinations and origins, population bases, and the roadway networks that are no longer the same as they were in the 80s. There's different distribution to the south. People are going different ways. The major employers in the area are different. There's a different footprint for commuter traffic, for Xerox to Kodak, and things of that nature. So when we have a point of comparison back in the 80s that 10,000 cars a day utilized that roadway, 2 lanes, crossed that with all those residential houses in that area. We know what the current wintertime travel is of 5,000 cars a day, and we have a very robust model that GTC maintains for the area of not just Arundecoit and Webster, but all of the geographic area here in the Monroe County area of where people are going. When we look at providing that link under all of the alternatives, we were able to see the distribution of travel time of where people were going, and that's what led us to that conclusion that we would see a growth in traffic to approximately that 8,000 cars a day through that outlet if a bridge connection was made there, wintertime and summertime. So we wouldn't necessarily forecast coming back to 10,000 cars a day level. It would rise to about 8,000.
I just wonder, I'm just asking a silly question here. If it's only 50% more, it sounds like spending a lot of money for not a lot of people. You know? Just a comment.
That's...
Hi, thank you very much for the meeting tonight. Before I retired, luckily, I used to travel that every day in the winter, and there were many times where I would drive down there and, oh no, they swung the bridge open. I had to turn around and come back. Statement in 2 questions. Number 1, it does sound like, I admit, I drove over that bridge in the wintertime. It's kind of quiet, and when I take my boat out in the summer, there's a lot more traffic. So I don't know what's going to happen with all that increased traffic driving across and trying to get your boat out and all the additional traffic, and as the gentleman here said about Mayor's Marina. 2 questions. What's going to happen with the boat launching facilities with the bridge options? Is there a reduction in the parking available and things like that? Was that looked into for the study?
So, yes, it was looked at. It was looked at.
I own a boat. That's why, truth and transparency, I go launch there. So,
in the impacts here and looking at this footprint, on the Mayor's Marina side, there is no impact to parking or any of that nature. On the New York State Parks, Monroe County side, the public boat launch over there, there's, under this concept with providing space for sidewalks and the road grade, there would need to be some relocation of parking spots. There's about 4 parking spots that would be affected here that would possibly need to be moved to another location adjacent to that parking lot. So there would be 4 car parking spaces in there that we're forecasting to be impacted by this project. The boat trailer staging in here are unaffected by this alternative.
okay. Second question. The ramps for the Seabreeze ramp system look to be more expensive. But I know that anything that you build that's metal, steel, a bridge, oh, by the way, friend, you're not going to have those boat launch people running that bridge. You don't want them running that bridge. They can't even just get boats into the water, okay. Once you put concrete down, concrete lasts forever and is a lot cheaper, per mile, than building a bridge and inspecting a bridge and paying for parts and motors and then having people run it. You have to have 3 shifts a day. That's 3 groups of people. You need vacation time. People have to be properly trained to move that bridge. Was that factored into long-term cost over, say, 20 years of what having a bridge would be in there versus putting Seabreeze ramps in?
So the answer is yes, all that was factored, and the answer is no, it wasn't just 20 years, it was forecasted out to 75, and then brought back to current dollars. That chart is that evaluation brought back It has the operation and maintenance, it has the construction, it has the long-term maintenance and rehabilitation that either a roadway needs or a bridge needs. And with that, this Seabreeze Drive, there are bridges and structures to make this work. So there are bridges associated with this. All those costs were factored into the analysis. Yep.
I'll never say a bad thing about Phil Donahue ever again. This job is not easy. I'm going to actually go here to a couple of faces who have not asked a question yet.
I'm one of the people that actually lives on the Irondequoit side. I'm one of those houses that's outlined in red on your map. A couple of things. One is the people who live in those houses, and I don't know whether it's true for the Webster people too, we've never received any notification of any of this through all the process since 2015. Fortunately, we watch television and we read the newspapers. That's the only reason that we know what's going on. It's not through any notification, which I think is a little bit strange because we certainly are going to be affected by whatever plan is finally, come up for agreement. Probably like a lot of the other people in this room, your thing about 5,000 cars a day, which you said was in 2010 and then in March of 2017, which, if you remember, was when it was raining and flooding, and so I'm not sure how accurate your traffic counts are, but I'm sure that you will proceed with that. You're talking about whichever kind of bridge goes in, that 75% of the boaters will be able to fit under that 6 foot. Is that what I'm hearing?
There's a lot of information there that I'd like to address. We'll do the last one. These two alignments provide for 10 feet of clearance between the water level and the underside of the bridge. That's what allows that 75% of boat traffic to traverse under there.
So a lot more boats would be able to get...
Without the bridge having to open.
Right. Okay, so the bridge... Okay, I'm sorry.
Yep, no. Yes, approximately, yes. Right, yes.
And last but not least, I understand that this study has been funded. And when you publish your results, that's terrific. What happens next?
A municipal agency, an interested party, would have to champion, secure funding to go for an actionable project. And there's lots of different funding mechanisms that are out there, whether that's a town, a county, a state agency, somebody else would have to take the ball and go ahead and fund a future project. This would be a report that could help inform their decision to move forward with a project.
I'm going to head over here, and I'll be back over there, I promise. Somebody else had their hand up.
Thank you very much. I'm Rich Mall from Irondequoit, but I do have family on both sides of the bridge, and especially in northern Webster. So there are, I do know my family on Webster. They do have a problem during the summertime because they have to go all the way up Bay Road and come around and come back down to visit family. So I think there is a benefit. There are a lot of people from Webster that are would like to see the bridge year round. The other thing I'd like to make a comment on is the queuing up of the both for the boats and the cars. I mean, I've spent a lot of time down at walking up and down the piers, and I don't see a lot of boats that I don't think could make it. That couldn't make it with a 10-foot clearance. So I think your 75% might be conservative. I think it's probably maybe 80 or more. I don't know, but I'm not a boater. I don't have a sailboat, so I don't know. But so those are my two comments. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
You want to just pass it to me? Sure.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bill Christ, and I'm president of Rochester Offshore Powerboat Association. So I'm basically representing a lot of power boaters, and like the gentleman over here, I represent a lot of trailer boaters. So again, we did hear about what Supervisor Nesbitt asked about mayors, and you barely touched on the state boat launch. Before I even get to that, though, I've got to go with what you just said here. You've got the 10-foot clearance on the two movable bridge options. At what water level are you talking about that clearance? Because in case you're not totally aware of it, the water level was so high this year that the 10-foot clearance might have been 3 feet based on water level. If you're going by average water level heights, that may have all have changed right now with Plan 2014. So I'm asking you, based on your 10 feet, where did you come up with that figure?
This is based off of the Coast Guard published charts, which they set all the regulations on, their established water elevation.
Ordinary high.
What's that?
Published ordinary high water level.
Right. Which, as we know, this year changed everything.
It does fluctuate, and
Okay.
again, basis of comparison, we're going off of those current Coast Guard regulations and situations. Actionable project goes forward. You know, if there's more historic data and if that level changes as a result of the new operating procedures, a bridge would have to be established based off of that as well.
Okay, understood. As I'm looking at your map, and you pointed out that maybe 4 parking spaces would be changed right there. The boat launch itself wouldn't be. But Culver Road, just before it gets those 4 parking spaces, that's an access and an exit for the boat launch and the trailers to go in there. Okay? Is there still going to be that access there? Because it looks like where you are, without me looking, it's could be blocked.
No. I think what you're,
If you go back to the slide you just had, you could see what I'm saying.
You're talking Seabreeze Drive comes down.
No, I'm talking right at the boat launch. The launch going into the water, not the road itself. Go right to the park, the marine park. Right there at the marine park, okay? Right there is the boat launch. Directly north of that is a roadway access. Is that going to be affected?
That's a driveway access off of Culver
Right.
in. That's maintained.
And that would stay there, okay. That would be one question. Because I'd also be concerned when you say the 4 spots would be moved, I don't know where, because as it stands now, that marine park is supposed to be for boats with trailers only. And when Monroe County was operating it, they had a sheriff that was maintaining that pretty much. This past year, Irondequoit took over, and I see Supervisor Seeley's not here to hear, and they've done a completely horrendous job. So now, as it stands, well, when the launch was open, if you were aware of that and been down there, as I was as a boater, half the time you couldn't pull your trailer in because the people that are either spectators or from the businesses there are parking in there. Okay, so I don't know where you're going to put those other 4 parking spots for those spectators who are already clogging because Irondequoit's not patrolling that boat launch and keeping them out of our trailer spots. But now my second question is, and I'm sorry, that was more of a comment. My second question is, you were talking about the queuing of vehicles coming down. And again, we've talked about the west side, and I do support what Supervisor Nesbitt and the gentleman said about turning into Mayor's Marina. Now you've got the same issue over here on the east side, or the west side. If people are coming from Webster, they've got to turn left to get into the Marine Park entrance. If you're coming from the west side, and you're coming down and you've got to queue in around Bill Gray's and around Don's Original, now you're queuing in with, as you said, maybe 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet of traffic. I'm towing a 32-foot boat, which is modest. With a large truck, I'm over 50 feet. That's 4 car lengths. So I'm taking up 4 cars with one. Imagine 10 of us boaters trying to get down there with all the cars. Has that been taken into consideration, or are you just looking at an average car length?
Rick?
Yep, go.
We use an average length of approximately 25 feet per vehicle. So, and that includes, that includes some trucks with some small trailers. So, yeah, so.
I'll come back to you in a second. I'm just going to, some people who haven't, and forgive me, I know for folks who have made a comment and then are putting their hand back up, I'm trying to only to get around to the people who have not made a comment yet.
Hi, okay. My question may be a little bit more specific, and it just kind of pertains to us because we're on the Webster side, and we live like 3 houses in. We just wanted to know how that would impact us. I guess 2 of the plans, right? The one that's the most favorable and the other one,
So somewhere in this
Yeah,
area,
'cause
without pinpointing it.
Right, right. And no, that's
That area.
okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. We weren't sure, like, because we have this private drive, like, how we would, I don't know, access the new road.
Okay, so with this conceptual layout, there's some of the parking, you can see it under this map, where you pull off a Lake Road and there's the perpendicular parking area there. Some of that in this stretch right here is under what we're depicting as new sidewalk. That parking area has been mitigated over here with new spots in what is the cul-de-sac turnaround area. That private drive that comes in over here off of Lake Road, serves all those houses and then loops back out, would still be connected in. So that loop behind that parking area would still be 2 points of contact onto Lake Road and access all those houses under this option. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I'm going to, new comment? Okay.
Thank you. I'm a lifelong Webster resident, and I would like to see a year-round bridge put in over the outlet. There's frequent construction going on 104 and on the Major Bay Bridge in the summertime, and it's awful, the backups you can face if you're trying to travel that way. So it'd be a huge help to me to be able to go over the outlet bridge.
Thank you for your comment.
All right. We've got, I'll be back to you. I'm sorry, I've passed this poor gentleman by a few times. I'm going to let you have the,
I'm sure this has been brought up in your studies, but power outages. I know Stutson Street has it probably twice a year where the bridge is either up or the bridge is down, and they can't get it to go up or they can't get it to go down. What happens, is there a backup plan for the bridge being down in an emergency and you got to get it up, or if it's up and you can't get it down?
So the answer is typically, again, when an actionable project goes forward, those type of details would be vetted into it. Usually there is some form of backup power to, if they're, not just relying on the public grid, but yeah, there's also usually a mechanical means to override the electrical means. Sometimes, as is the case with Stutson, all of those systems go on the fritz for a little bit. But the engineering controls typically are put in there that there's a primary, secondary, and tertiary backup systems to allow the full functionality. And that would be figured out if a project goes forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be honest with you folks. I came down here this evening to see how badly I was going to get screwed. But after I followed your roadmap to how you arrived at your best solutions. And I think you gentlemen, you ma'am, you got it about right. You really did. And no.
Well, thank you.
No, really. And nothing's going to be perfect, everybody. It's not. But what other options that they went over are going to eliminate all the problems? As far I know, one of my neighbors was talking about having an emergency and not being able to get out. Most people, if you go to if the traffic's queued up, you go to and say, "Hey, my wife's got to get to the hospital." Everybody's going to move heaven and earth to get you out of there. To the point of having a lot of traffic. Just this tremendous influx of traffic along Lake Road, along that bridge. It may not be as bad as you think. People are going to try that once or twice. They're going to say, "Man, it's such a zoo to get across there. The weather's good. I'm going up, as you said, Fran. I'm going up along the Rundequoit Bridge, Bay Bridge. I lived down there for years. I did consulting work in the city." And it was no great hardship for me it was a little more convenient when the bridge was down, but it was no great hardship to make a 3-mile run up to that Rundequoit Bridge. Okay. And when you take a kind of, and the other point, Bill Mayer, he's pretty clever at getting people in and out of there in a big hurry. He really is. And a lot of the people that have sailboats or other boats that they're mooring there, they park their car at that school on Bay Road, in the back, and then he runs a shuttle service. So that cuts down, that again is going to mitigate how much traffic you're going to get there. So, as I said, looking at everything, this I think you guys, man, did a good job. Thank you. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a kind of a comment about making decisions based on
There you are.
based on facts versus opinions. And it's kind of a build on what this gentleman just said. I can imagine there's probably thousands of configurations like this in this country. So as part of the project going forward, the idea of putting the bridge in solves the problem of access for both sides. That's the basic idea. When somebody brings up a negative of having that access on both sides, like for example, we live in a house and the cars will be all queued up. I mean, this is a problem that, this is a circumstance that happens thousands and thousands of times in this country. So as part of the new plan, if we could get a consensus on what the number one negative is and what the number two negative is, and get like the 15 negatives, and then go and look at configurations around the country and say, is that factually really a negative? Or when somebody is blocking your driveway, there's nobody in the other lane, and somebody beeps the horn, you just pull out and the car, goes right around, right? Well, I mean, that's right. That's what's going to. I mean, that's common sense.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, to summarize it, it's my comment. Whatever decision gets made, if we could somehow get a consensus of prioritizing all the reasons we shouldn't do it, and then benchmark other places that have this configuration, how do they handle that problem, and is it really a problem? I'd like to see that included as the part of going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, somebody had their hand up before. It's been a few minutes. I'm not even sure he still has a question, so I'm going to.
I do. I want to make a statement and then ask a question. John Hutchings, I am the chairperson of the Webster Democratic Committee, and I was the former candidate for town supervisor in Webster. And I want to read a statement and then ask a question. Whether by apathy, suppression, or avoidance on our behalf, it appears that Webster residents did not have much input in the stakeholders portion of this study. Got to refresh my phone. I've put 2 polls on Facebook, one a couple months ago. Over 500 people responded. This is on the Webster, New York Facebook page with over 19, almost 20,000 people on it. 9-1 Webster residents voted in favor of a bridge solution. 9-1, over 500. There's a current poll on a Webster Beacon page. I've started that, full disclosure. It's a closed group. You can go there. I'll put you on it. It is currently 41-3 in favor of a bridge solution. 41-3. That's Webster residents poll. How did you explain it? I said, do you want a bridge or you do not want a bridge? It was pretty simple. A little better than that. I might have elaborated a little bit more. Lost my spot here. Oh, this is the statement part. With all due respect, Ron Nesbitt's job here isn't to speak for a few constituents. It was to represent the needs and wants of all of his constituents, and he failed those people when he ignored his obligation to inform us of the opportunity to participate as stakeholders in this process. So my question is to Dave Seeley, since Mr. Nesbitt's already stated his opposition to the project, and the next step is probably you taking the lead on this, where do Webster residents go if they want to actively participate from this point forward?
I'm not going to answer any questions about Webster. Obviously, Webster residents should communicate with their elected leaders, Rockaway residents communicate with their leaders, and I think it can go both ways as well.
Okay.
They're going to tell other town's constituents who they should communicate with.
Well, I mean, based on the past, we haven't had an opportunity. I guess I could turn that to the panel. I mean, do you have an answer for that? If Webster residents want to participate going forward, what are their options?
I would just say there's ample opportunity. There's an open public comment that will be distributed to both the entire steering committee. So there's a steering committee that's made up of interests at both sides of the bay as well as other government stakeholders.
And just as a matter of process, and now I will speak as I'm the planner in the room. So the plans will be distributed in hard copy on to both both towns, and we've both said that we're going to keep a physical hard copy, one at our town hall and one in our town library. Electronically, we'll have the report as well. The town of Arundequoit, certainly, we have a page that we have for this project, and so we'll put it up there. My presumption would be the town of Webster could also do the same thing and have the copy of the report available electronically. That draft report's going to be out there and available for comment in general for at least a couple weeks, so that we can get feedback and thoughts about the content. And I will tell you that the draft report, this is a very lovely and concise set of PowerPoint slides. The report is going to have a wealth of information and data that were used to arrive at the sort of consolidated summary slides you see tonight. And so this is the beginning of this is the culmination of an analysis or a feasibility study, but it's the start of a community conversation. And when I say community conversation, I mean a global community or regional conversation, because infrastructure, especially transportation infrastructure, isn't just a one town or a two town thing. It's really a regional issue, and looking at things more holistically. Again, that's me being the planner, looking at the big picture and seeing how all things are interconnected. I'm going to stop talking now. Any other questions, folks, that want to? Okay.
Sorry. This is more for me to get a contextual footing on what's going on here, because we have people that want to go boating. We have cars that want to run all the time. We have people on both sides that want to have access for business and don't want cars parked in front of their driveways if possible. So when that bridge had 4 feet of clearance over the water, you had to row down, you had to take a rowboat and you had to duck down and paddle with your hand to go underneath. Did the Coast Guard not consider the bay safe harbor?
The short answer is that's correct. It was, when that bridge came out, was part of the designation of the bay as a safe harbor. And once that designation's been made, there is really no going back.
Okay, so so the definition of safe harbor that's driving a 75-foot clearance, is that so that any boat that is docked in the bay and goes to the lake can come back? Or in theory, are we supposed to believe there's any 75-foot tall boat on the lake has to be able to, it could be a freighter full of concrete headed for the river, and it has to be able to go into the bay?
Yeah, the short answer to that, just so it's on the microphone, is the Coast Guard has rules, and obviously they expect that anybody that's on the lake could find refuge within the harbor or in the bay itself. Realizing that there is 100 and some odd foot wide channel that, when it's on navigation maps, it's designated as a 16-foot draft in that channel. Anecdotally, sometimes it's less than that, as it, depending on dredging and operations. So there's the real world functioning of what type of boat could actually fit through there regardless. But then there's the programmatic governance that the Coast Guard says thou shalt do. And that's where we get that 75-foot height, because of the safe harbor.
Okay, very strange. Very expensive.
Sir, did you have a question?
Real quickly, is there any other place along Lake Road where you could make an inlet? Anybody ever looked at that?
Sorry. The formal studies that we've seen, and as part of this study, an alternative inlet to replace this one was not considered.
Would it be conceivable to do so? And, I don't know, that's why I'm asking. And possibly look at it as a tunnel.
All the water north of the bridge looks like a safe harbor to me.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard thinks differently, though, I think.
The short answer to looking at that is, with the comment period coming in here, we can address comments and incorporate them as best we can into the report.
All right, I just want to make sure there's no new faces on before I give the mic to this gentleman right here who's...
Just quickly before I address something that was just said, I just wanted to thank the group Fisher Associates. I think you guys did a fine job. Slides are good. You did a real good job. It was very well done. And you've done a great job answering questions. Just real quickly for the gentleman with the safe harbor, and I've got something else to bring out. I was on the lake one time that within a matter of 15 minutes, it went from dead flat to 4 to 6 foot waves, and every boat that came in at that inlet was blowing up on the rocks. I missed the rocks by 2 feet, and the only reason I didn't get damaged, I managed to gun it through to get into the safe harbor. So that is a safe harbor. I want to go back to when I said when you're backing up, you're queuing up, and I said now you've got the boats and the trailers queuing up. And again, I know the businesses were consulted, and Fran was consulted over there, and I know the businesses would like the road traffic, but Fran's the only one here, Mayors is not here, Castaways is not here, Bill Gray's, Don's Original doesn't appear to be here. Have they considered, and is someone here from them? Shamrock, Shamrock's here, but Shamrock is up the road. That's not it. I'm talking about the people right down there in the flat, down in the water. Okay, and I know Shamrock, because my boat club has met there many, many times. But the people down there, when that traffic backs up, as it will, and especially if there's an emergency and they have to open the bridge for the boats, was it addressed to those business people? And Fran could answer this, maybe offline. But was it addressed? How's it going to affect their business and economically when traffic is backed up all the way up to Shamrock Jacks? Because you can't get down there. Because there are times when I'm not boating. I love to get on my motorcycle. I like to go down there and see. And if I've got to get down there and I can't get over to Fran's or I can't get over to Bill Gray's or anything because of all the traffic, was that studied at all possibly?
So, in our discussions with those business owners and the representatives that were on the stakeholder committees, the parks and, the people in and around that area specifically, when we're having discussions about their operations, we talked about in these two particular alternatives, how that would work and understood their concerns about backup and traffic. And there was a very lengthy discussion about weather situations and the pros and cons associated with traffic backing up as well as the access across. There was some discussions about having the ability to get the ease of travel across there really benefits businesses. There is some concern about the backups and what the impacts would be to businesses. So we did have all those discussions with them. Trying to distill that down into the report, it comes into the numbers that we were showing here as far as those lengths and what those impacts are. Framing that as a reminder that those are short-term impacts when the bridge is up. In a bad weather situation, stormy, you can make the correlation that if it's bad weather out on the lake and boats are trying to come in, you're also going to see less traffic on that roadway because the weather environment isn't promoting going up there necessarily for tourism. Those day trip type situations, that traffic isn't there. So that backup, there's pros and cons, gives and take associated with all this. And we tried to convey that to the business owners that we did speak with about this situation. Hopefully that sort of summarized. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to just, here we go.
Okay, now I'll give you a perfect example of backup traffic. 2 years ago, we had Pokemon. Anybody remember Pokemon? You couldn't get down any street. They didn't care where you were. They parked in front of everybody's homes. That wasn't something that was planned. That was not something that somebody could see ahead of time. Things happen that you can't plan for. But Dave went and tried to, at one time, to get they had 6 spots down there, 6 zones, so it was a big thing. He tried to get all that moved, but they were not, somebody was in Grand Central Station and they wouldn't even move one inside of there, I heard. So nothing got moved. Luckily, it faded out, but that whole summer, people couldn't get into their homes because people were parked there, but it's not the norm. It's not people with 34-foot boats and a big truck. You're very lucky. I don't see a lot of them down there, and I see a lot of boats go by. I mean, that's not the norm, that's all.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm from Webster, and I was initially concerned about our property. This is my girlfriend. You having to take over our property, and we're very lucky that it looks like in the proposal you wouldn't have to do that if moving forward you would go with option B or maybe option D. Those were the bridge options. So, but moving forward, it seems like a big push is to put a bridge in. One suggestion or number that I would have you keep in mind, and maybe you already know this, and the gentleman had brought up the point as far as lake level, and fingers crossed, hopefully it doesn't get to that level again, but the magic number is 249, and that's where the lake level was when it peaked this past year. I hope it doesn't get there. You said you referred to, or I don't know if you, OJC, or who you referred to, what level, lake level you were using. Do you know the number at all that you were using when you came up with that 10-foot?
I don't have it with me off the top of my head, but we do have the number that we based it off of.
Okay, so 249 this past year was our peak, just to, moving forward, just to keep an eye on that.
Thank you.
Well, and just in the report will reference the height that was used to
Yes.
as the basis. So even though we don't have it as part of the slide here, as part of the report, it'll be in there. And so when you're looking at that, if there's variation in the water level, high or low, then that would change, obviously, the clearance. I'm going to come up here and then.
Hi, my name is Jeff. I'm a 6-year Arundecoit homeowner. Are there any Webster businesses here? For those that are here from Webster that might be against a bridge or against a solution that improves transportation from east to west, there are businesses I don't visit for half the year in Webster. I mean, why are the Webster businesses not here? Why? I would think most of them will be for it. Bayside Pub, whoever owns Castaways, the thrift store, the liquor store, Three Flags, the nicer Wegmans than the one in East Arundecoit. These are things I would go to. There's a lot of things to the east I would love to go to. And I don't want to get into the mall stuff in Arundecoit. I have no responsibility for that. But those from Webster, or those that know people in Webster that might be against a solution that improves transportation and safety for those on land, nothing against those on boat, but we were not in the Florida Keys. Rochester, we're on land. So I'd like to focus on the transportation, and those in Webster, the businesses, I think, seems like no one's talking about the improved dollar amounts that their businesses would be seeing. So thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
All right, so and I don't want to make any presumptions, but it seems like the comments or questions are starting to, at this point, maybe come to a close. So I'm maybe going to call going once, going twice, going three times. No, and I don't know if Dave might want to close this out, but I'm going to say I want to thank everybody for all of their comments, their patience with me getting to you, and with the microphone, so we really appreciate that. But for the folks viewing at home, this has been very helpful. This will be, this has been recorded. There's a video, and so we'll have this. Anybody, for their viewing pleasure, God help them, because I don't know where this camera is. So thank you for everybody for being here, for your patience and for your participation. We really appreciate it. It's an important part of community planning is having all kinds of perspectives represented, and that's really one of the primary goals of this whole process.
I just, on behalf of the town and all the other stakeholders, thank Fisher Associates for doing a great job, not just tonight, but throughout the process. And thank everyone for coming and for being respectful of sometimes divergent opinions. And we look forward to continuing to work together on this. So thank you. Stay safe. Have a good night.